Hey friends, it's Simon Hurley and welcome into my new craft room. It's slowly getting cleaned as I'm moving in and I'm so excited about it. It's still a little bit echoey in here, but I'll work that out in the next couple of weeks. Alright guys, today I'm going to be sharing how to use the new Simon Hurley Create Welcome Home stamp set, how to color it and create some really fun scenes using it. So without further ado, let's get into today's video. Alright, so for the cards in today's video, I'm using the new Welcome Home stamp set from my Simon Hurley Create release. This one has a bunch of different furniture in it that's pretty large, so you can create some really fun home scenes on your cards to give to new neighbors, or if you guys are moving into a new house, it's a really good stamp set for that. So for this first card, I'm going to create a slimline card, which is 3.5 by 8.5. So I've taken some of the images like the rug and the fireplace that I want to be flat on the card to start out the scene in my Misty stamping tool so I can stamp them straight down onto the card. I'm going to add a little bit of pressure and then stamp them down using some jet black Archival ink. Now the reason I'm doing this in my Misty stamping tool is just because I want to make sure that if I need to, I can always stamp them twice in the exact same spot. So here you'll see that I'll stamp down the rug and the fireplace, and if I needed to, I can go back over and stamp it again one more time. Once that's all complete, I'm going to then go in with a little bit of clear heat embossing powder and heat set that. That's going to create a nice little barrier of clear heat embossing powder, keep my lines really nice and black, but also when I go into watercolor, I find that it holds the watercolors really nicely inside those lines, and that'll be really helpful. So if you struggle with that, I recommend doing some heat embossing. Now I've also stamped on some other images from the set to build up the scene on other sheets of cardstock, and then I'm going to go in and do my watercoloring. Now here I just used a regular paintbrush and I'm going to dip it in some water. I always like to start off by adding down a layer of water down onto the surface, just kind of a thin layer, and then I'll start off by adding my color down with a little bit of water. This is going to create a nice light wash of color, but by adding the water down first, it allows the color to blend a little bit more on the surface without sinking directly into the cardstock. I find that that's a huge tip that a lot of people miss when they're watercoloring, and it really helps you out to get a much more even coverage. Now once I've added the first layer of color down, I can go in with a little bit less water and that same color on my paintbrush and go in and add some shading, which is going to make the color a little bit darker, and I find it helps to add some depth and dimension. Now I'm going to do the same thing with all of the images here. I'll show a couple other ways to color in the images a little bit quicker later on, but this is quite easy to do. I just use my stark white cardstock, add down the water first, and then I add down the layer of color. And then lastly, I'm able to go in with that final layer with a little bit less water and add some shading. In this case, I added it down to the couch cushions on both edges, and it really made the couch come to life. I have no particular way that I add my shading in. I can kind of add it to the edges or where images meet, which I find to be really helpful to bring that image to life. Now I also thought that I'd mention here, if you guys struggle with getting control of your watercoloring, I always recommend to just pick up a regular brush instead of a water brush. This way you can really control how much water goes down onto the surface. I find that with water brushes sometimes you get a little bit too much water, whereas here I use a very minimal amount of water, just enough to get the colors moving, but not enough to make it puddle on my image and make a big mess. I find that to be really helpful, and these are just Ranger artist brushes. They come in a big pack. They're nothing super fancy, but I love them for coloring in. So then for this background, after I'm done coloring everything in, I wanted to add kind of at least a wall color to help ground everything down. So I'm going to use a little bit of clear skies on a blending brush so I get a nice soft color and bring that in from the edges as I blend it out. I'll kind of work that color in, making it lighter as I go further in and making the edges a little bit darker blue. Of course, if you guys want to add any background stamp on to add some texture or any stencils, that can be really fun as well. Of course, you can do stamps and masking, but here I decided to just cut out my images separately. I find this to be a pretty quick and easy process. The images aren't super detailed, and also I really recommend these Fiskars Spring Assist scissors. They have this spring which pops back out at you and opens your scissors up again, so they're really easy to cut and not get tired, and also they're really great at getting into all of the little details. So now to layer up my scene, don't be afraid to layer images and kind of hide some behind each other. Here I tucked the plant in the background to make it look like it was next to or behind that couch, which really makes the illusion of creating a full room. So when you're making scenes on your cards, don't be afraid to layer things up and not be afraid to cover things up a little bit. So then I added a sentiment on there from that stamp set, congrats on your new home, and this is a great card to give to a new neighbor or a friend that moved, and I just love this scene that we were able to create on the card. So for the next card, I'm going to do the same thing. I've stamped down a couple of the images that I want to use to create my room scene, and then I'm going to go in with my inks and start my watercoloring. Now to create my palette of color, I didn't really share. I took my ink pads and I just smooshed them down onto the surface of my craft sheet. That's where you see all that color on the side there, and that's where I'm pulling my color from. I find that my Simon Hurley Create ink pads do a really great job of giving that nice smooth and even color, and they're really great as watercolors, super forgiving as well. Now I also wanted to mention during this watercoloring process, I stuck with a really strict color theme for this next card. I did blues, greens, and then I also brought in grays and more neutral colors as well. I found that this one came together super cohesively, so if you're struggling to build a full scene on your card, it might be because you're adding a little bit too many colors in there at once. So I really kept this one super minimal, and you'll see there's a lighter teal, a light green, and also this dark navy blue. And by bringing in those three colors consistently on every item from the room, it really helps to bring everything together as a cohesive looking room on your card. Here I did this rug, which I really loved, where I again used those exact same three colors, added my little bit of shading by doing the water first, then my color, and then go in and add a little bit color with less water to make it darker. Then for the background of the card, I did the same kind of blending technique, but I used a little bit of Gur, which is my brown color, to again keep the thing fully cohesive and not introduce many new colors in the background there. When I'm blending a full background like this, I also find that these Gina K blending brushes are super helpful because they give a lot softer of a color which you can build up over time. So you can see I built up the edges but kept everything else really soft and light, which can be hard to do with some other blending tools sometimes. Now again, layer things up. Here I put the couch down, then I put the table down but overlapped it a little bit to make it look like the table was sitting in front of the couch there. So don't be afraid to do that. And then here I layered up that blanket on top of the couch, making it look like it's hanging over the edge. And once again, I tucked the plant behind the couch a little bit to make it look like it was next to each other. Instead of keeping everything kind of far apart and not touching each other, this keeps the scene a lot more cohesive on your card, and I really love how it turned out. And again, just stamped a simple sentiment from that stamp set that says welcome home, and I find that these are really great to give to neighbors or people who've moved. When I moved, I found that we needed a stamp set like this to give us fun gifts. So now I'm going to stamp that chimney image that I'm going to use on a card, and I'm going to create a fun little Christmas in July scene. Because I included these two little stockings, one that has a plaid on it and one that can just be colored in. And they also have a solid image which you can stamp down on top. So here I used it to stamp down the solid red and green that I stamped down right on top of the stockings to color them in super easily. I love when there's solid images like this because it makes coloring really simple to add a little bit of shading to an image and not take a ton of time doing it in case if you don't love all the watercoloring that I shared. Now here's another way you can color in as well. Here I'm using just a regular ink blending tool. I'm going to add that warm glow of that fireplace all around it. And then to get into some of the details, I went in with this detail ink blending tool. These are from Ranger. They got little sponges on the end, and they're really helpful to get into all those tiny little areas. So here I filled in some of the little fire areas and added some shading with a little bit of traffic cone ink. Now to finish off the fireplace and color the rest in, I went in with a little bit of woof, which is the gray color, and blended in from the edges with just a simple round ink blending tool here. This is going to add nice shading to the edge of that, and then make the inside of it kind of as we go in, have that nice warm glow of that yellow and a little bit lighter gray color. This was super easy to color in, so if you saw me coloring all the other images earlier, you can of course use that technique on the plants, the couches, the rugs, and make the room come together a lot quicker and easier. Now for the background, I wanted to add kind of a brick background and make it look like it was part of the fireplace. So I went in with this window scene maker stencil, and I'm just going to use this brick pattern in the corner. The rest of this creates a really beautiful window, but I just wanted to use this brick pattern, and you're able to use this small pattern and repeat it over the top of your full entire card. So if you wanted the pattern to kind of interlock fully, you totally can by laying it up next to each other and interlocking it like a puzzle. But when I use the stencil, I like to just do kind of random patterns of the brick sporadically across my card. This makes it look like it's not fully cohesive, so it's not super distracting, but it gives the illusion that the whole background is brick as I do it tone on tone with that gray there. Then I added the fireplace down onto the card with a little bit of foam tape, and I added the stockings up above the fireplace to make it look like they were hanging above, ready for Christmas morning. So that's why I love this stamp set. You're really able to build your scenes, and if you wanted to create a full Christmas scene, you totally could. Now I went in with the Posh Poinsettas stamp set to add the Happy Holidays from Our Home to Yours sentiment, and then I heat embossed that with a little bit of clear embossing powder to make it nice and shiny to match the rest of my images. Now I wanted to give the fire a little bit of kind of gloss to it, so I added down some glossy accents, which is going to dry nice, clear, and shiny, and give the fire a little bit more depth and dimension and interest on the card. I love how this one turned out. Again, that simple coloring technique with just the ink blending and the blending tools to get into the smaller areas. And then also creating this fun Christmas scene with this stamp set and thinking a little bit outside of the box. Alright friends, I hope you really enjoyed this video as much as I loved creating it. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up. Make sure to click that subscribe button down below, and also leave me a comment down there letting me know which card from today's video was your favorite. I can't wait to chat with you all down there. And thank you so much for spending time with me today as you watched today's video. I hope to see you guys again very soon. Have a wonderful day. Bye.